in the heart of Nyora village, in Africa, where the vast green fields stretched beyond the eye could see, and the evening drums echoed through the hills, lived Zuena and Luyando. Their love was the kind that people spoke about with admiration. For 5 wonderful years, they had shared not only a home, but also dreams, laughter, and struggles. They were partners in every sense, always standing by each other's side, no matter what life brought their way. Zuena was a woman of rare beauty, not just in appearance but in character. She carried herself with grace, always showing kindness to those around her. Whether it was helping an elderly neighbor fetch water or comforting a crying child, she never turned away from anyone in need. The people of Nyora village respected her deeply, and many wives wished to be like her. Among those who loved her most was Essie, Luyando's mother. From the very first day, Essie had welcomed Zuena into the family with open arms. She admired how Zuena cared for Luyando, how she cooked his meals with love, and how she managed their home with wisdom beyond her years. To Essie, Zuena was not just her son's wife, she was the daughter she had always wished for. Luyando, too, adored his wife. He worked hard in the fields, ensuring that their home lacked nothing. Every evening, when he returned, he would find Zuena waiting for him with a warm smile, a home-cooked meal, and stories to share about her day. Their love was strong, and many believed it was unshakable. But love, no matter how deep, is often tested. In the shadows, unseen hands were already weaving a different fate, one that would threaten everything Zuena and Luyando had built together. The village of Zundara was always alive with the sounds of laughter, the chatter of traders, and the rustling of the wind through the tall trees. Life moved at its usual steady rhythm, until one day, everything changed. A stranger arrived, her presence like a storm in the middle of calm waters. Kina was unlike any woman the villagers had seen before. Her beauty was mesmerizing. Her deep, dark eyes held secrets that no one could unravel, and her smile was both warm and dangerous. Her long, flowing robes swayed gracefully with each step, and the golden jewelry on her wrists jingled like a melody meant to lure the unsuspecting. She introduced herself as a simple trader, a woman looking to start fresh in Zundara. She spoke humbly, telling the villagers that she had traveled far, hoping to build a new life in a place where no one knew her past. The villagers, kind and welcoming, accepted her without question. They offered her a place to stay and listened eagerly to the stories she told of distant lands and exotic goods. But Kina was not what she seemed. Behind her charming words and kind smiles, she hid a dangerous truth. She had done this before, in many villages, in many homes. She was not a trader. She was a woman who knew how to make men lose themselves in her beauty. She had left behind a trail of broken families, women abandoned by their husbands, and men who had lost everything trying to please her. And now, she had found her next target. As Kina walked through the village, she observed the men carefully, searching for one who had everything to lose, one who would be worth the game. It didn't take her long to find him. Jabo. He was strong, respected, and most importantly, deeply in love with his wife, Nyora. A man like that was always the most satisfying to take, for the greater the love, the sweeter the victory. From that moment, Kina made a vow to herself. She would take Jabo away from Nyora, no matter what it took. It started with small moments, simple, harmless encounters that no one would have thought twice about. Kina had a way of making herself seen without making it obvious. Whenever Jabo was around, she was there too, always finding a reason to cross his path. One morning, as Jabo was returning from the fields, Kina appeared, struggling to carry a basket of fruits. She sighed heavily, pretending to be exhausted. "Oh, Jabo," she said softly, her voice smooth like honey. "I don't know how the women here manage. I've never carried such a heavy load before." Jabo, being the kind-hearted man he was, could not ignore someone in need. He stepped forward and lifted the basket with ease. "You should have asked someone to help you," he said, walking beside her. Kina smiled, tilting her head slightly, as if she were seeing him for the first time. "Not everyone is as strong as you, Jabo. You must take great care of Nyora with these hands of yours." Her words were simple, but the way she said them made something shift in Jabo's chest. At home, Nyora noticed small changes. Jabo still loved her, but his attention wavered at times. He seemed lost in thought, his mind elsewhere even when she spoke to him. When she asked what was wrong, he brushed it off, saying he was just tired. Meanwhile, Kina continued her game. Whenever she saw Jabo, she found a reason to touch his arm lightly, to compliment him in a way that no one else did. She acted helpless in his presence, needing his strength, his advice, his protection. And little by little, without even realizing it, Jabo started noticing her more. Nyora's heart grew uneasy. She trusted her husband, but she could feel the shift. The love between them was strong, but even the strongest walls can crack if someone keeps chipping away at them. And Kaina was patient. She knew exactly what she was doing. It started as whispers, soft, carefully placed words that spread like smoke through the village. Kaina knew that if she wanted to take Jabo from Nyora, she couldn't just lure him in with beauty alone. She needed to plant doubt, to make him see his wife differently. And so, she began her true game, one of deception and lies. At the marketplace, she spoke in hushed tones to the women. "Have you noticed how distant Nyora has been from Jabo lately?" she would ask, her voice filled with fake concern. "Some say she no longer respects him as she used to." In another corner of the village, she whispered to the elders, shaking her head as if troubled. "I heard that Nyora does not take care of her home as she should. A man like Jabo deserves better, don't you think?" The villagers listened. Even those who loved Nyora began to wonder if there was truth in the words. After all, didn't all rumors start from somewhere? And when the same whispers come from different mouths, doubt begins to feel like truth. Jabo himself was not immune to Kaina's poison. Whenever he was near her, she spoke with careful intent. "Jabo, I admire the kind of husband you are," she said one evening, her eyes filled with false admiration. Not all men would be so patient if their wife took them for granted. Jabo frowned. "Nyora does not take me for granted," he said, though the words felt weaker than they should have. Kaina sighed, looking away as if reluctant to say more. "Of course," she murmured. "I only meant, well, people talk, but I should not say such things." By the time she walked away, the damage had already been done. Doubt had taken root in Jabo's heart. At home, Nyora could feel the distance growing. Jabo spoke less, his touch was colder, and his mind seemed elsewhere. He stayed out longer than before, and when she asked where he had been, his answers were short. "Just around the village," he would say, but Nyora knew. She knew he was with her, with Kaina, and worst of all, Jabo did not even realize he was slipping away. Jabo had always been a man of honor, a man who stood by his word, but now, under the spell of Kaina, he was no longer the man Nyora knew. His heart had been poisoned, his thoughts clouded by the lies whispered into his ears. The love he once shared with Nyora, a love that had been unshakable, now felt like a distant memory. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jabo made a decision that would change everything. With cold eyes and a hardened heart, he looked at Nyora and spoke the words she never thought she would hear. "It's over, Nyora. I am leaving you." Nyora felt the world collapse around her. "Jabo, you don't mean this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We have built a life together. Don't let her destroy it." But Jabo's face remained unreadable. The man who once held her with such tenderness now looked at her as if she were nothing but a burden. "Kaina loves me in a way you never did," he said coldly. "I have made my choice." With that, he walked away, leaving Nyora standing in the doorway of the home they once shared. The pain was unbearable. She fell to the ground, tears streaming down her face as she clutched her chest, as if trying to hold together the pieces of her broken heart. The whispers in the village had turned into open gossip. Women shook their heads in pity, while some men muttered about how quickly Jabo had changed. But no one's heart ached more than Sema, Jabo's mother. Sema refused to stay silent. She marched to her son's new home, where Kaina now stood beside him like a queen who had won her throne. "Jabo, listen to me, my son," Sema pleaded. "This woman is not who she claims to be. She has bewitched you. Look at how you have thrown away your wife, your family, everything you built." But Jabo only shook his head. "You don't understand, mother. Kaina is my future. Nyora is my past." Sema's heart broke for her son, for the foolishness that had consumed him. She turned to Kaina, staring deep into her eyes. "Mark my words, young woman. The truth always reveals itself, and when it does, you will regret the day you stepped into this village." But Kaina only smiled, a triumphant glint in her eyes. She had won. Nyora, watching from a distance, wiped her tears. She had lost the man she loved, but she still had something far greater, her dignity. And though she did not know it yet, Kaina's victory would not last forever. Sema could not rest. The pain of watching her son Jabo walk away from his loving wife Nyora to be with a woman like Kaina was too much to bear. Deep in her heart, she knew something was wrong. She had seen the way Kana smiled, a smile too perfect, too practiced. There was something dangerous behind those eyes. A woman who builds her happiness on another's tears cannot be trusted. Determined to find the truth, Sema began asking questions. She traveled to the neighboring villages, speaking to elders, traders, and women who had lived long enough to know every secret. At first, people hesitated, looking over their shoulders as if afraid. But when Sema assured them she was only seeking the truth, the whispers began. The first story came from an old market woman. "Kina? That name brings bad memories," she muttered, shaking her head. "She was once married in our village, to a kind man named Baraka. He loved her blindly, just as your son does now. But she ruined him, took all he had, then disappeared." Sema's heart pounded. "What happened to him?" she asked urgently. The old woman's face darkened. "No one knows for sure. Some say he went mad. Others say he left the village, ashamed of how she betrayed him. But that was only the beginning." As Sema continued digging, a far more terrifying truth emerged. In another village, she met an elderly healer who had once been called to treat a dying man. "That woman, Kina, she is cursed, I tell you," the healer whispered. "There was a wealthy merchant who took her in. Days later, he fell ill. We tried to save him, but his body grew weak too fast, as if something was eating him from the inside. When he died, Kina disappeared overnight, with all his riches." Sema's breath caught in her throat. Poison. Kina had poisoned the man for wealth. She stood there, hands trembling, rage boiling inside her. This was the woman who had tricked her son, a woman with a past soaked in betrayal and death. She had to warn Jabo. She had to open his eyes before it was too late. But as Sema turned to leave, the healer grabbed her wrist, her grip surprisingly strong for her age. "Be careful, mother. Kina is not just a liar. She is dangerous. If she knows you are uncovering her secrets, she will come for you too." Sema nodded, but she was not afraid. She had lived long enough to know that evil thrives only when good people stay silent, and she would not stay silent. At first, Jabo believed he had won the greatest prize, a woman so beautiful, so enchanting, that she made him forget everything else. But once Kina became his wife, the illusions shattered like broken glass. Gone was the sweet, gentle woman who had once gazed at him with admiration. In her place stood someone cold, sharp-tongued, and demanding. "Jabo, I need more gold bangles. I cannot be seen wearing the same ones twice," Kina would snap, tossing aside expensive jewelry as if it were worthless. "Jabo, why is there no meat in the stew today? Must I live like a poor woman?" Nothing was ever enough for her. She wanted more wealth, more power, more control. At first, Jabo tried to please her, thinking maybe she just needed time to adjust. But the more he gave, the more she took. He worked harder than ever, but his money never seemed to last. Kina spent it recklessly, buying expensive fabrics, perfumes, and gifts for herself, while the household crumbled. Then came the cruelty. She spoke to the servants as if they were beneath her. "Are you all deaf or just stupid? Move faster. I do not have all day," she would yell, throwing things when she was displeased. But what hurt Jabo the most was how she treated his mother, Sema. "Your mother visits too often, Jabo. She is old and useless. Tell her to stay away." Jabo's heart sank. This was not the woman he had fallen for. This was a stranger. As the days passed, the truth settled heavily on his shoulders. He had made a terrible mistake. He missed Nyora. He missed her kindness, her laughter, the way their home once felt warm and full of love. But it was too late. He had cast her aside for a woman who now controlled every part of his life, and Kana knew it. Whenever Jabo showed signs of regret, she tightened her grip on him. "You think you can leave me?" she sneered one night. "After all I have done for you, you belong to me now, Jabo. There is no going back." Jabo felt like a prisoner in his own home. The love he thought he had found was nothing more than a cruel trick. And now he was trapped, with no way out. Sema had seen enough. She could no longer stand by and watch her son suffer under Kana's control. The woman who had once charmed her way into Jabo's heart had now revealed her true self, greedy, cruel, and deceitful. But Sema was not a woman who bowed to evil. She had spent her life protecting her family, and she would not stop now. She knew that words alone would not be enough. Jabo was blinded by shame, too proud to admit his mistake. The villagers whispered about Kina's arrogance, but no one dared to confront her. She had to gather proof, real proof, that would expose Kina for who she truly was. Sema traveled secretly, visiting the villages where she had learned about Kina's dark past. She met Baraka's sister, who still carried the pain of how Kina had ruined her brother's life. She found an old merchant who had lost his wealth to Kina's tricks, and she spoke to the healer who had once tried to save a poisoned man, Kina's former victim. Everywhere she went, the stories were the same. Kina lured men in, used them for their money, and left them in ruins. When Sema returned to Zundara, she did not waste time. She went straight to the village elders, carrying the evidence of Kina's crimes. This woman is a danger to our people. She has left a trail of destruction behind her, and now she has trapped my son in her web. We must act before she does more harm. The elders listened carefully. They sent messengers to the villages Sema had mentioned, seeking confirmation. The responses came swiftly. Kina was a criminal, a fraud, a woman with a history of betrayal. The village elders knew what had to be done. They called for a council meeting and summoned Kina. The entire village gathered to witness the judgment. The once proud woman, who had walked through the village like a queen, now stood before the elders, her secrets laid bare for all to hear. Jabo, standing among the crowd, felt his heart sink deeper with every revelation. The woman he had left Nyora for, the woman he had chosen over his own mother, was nothing more than a snake in disguise. Kina tried to deny the accusations, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her past had finally caught up with her. The entire village gathered in the great meeting square, their eyes fixed on Kina, who stood before the elders, her once proud posture now stiff with fear. The same villagers who had once admired her beauty now whispered about her lies, her greed, her crimes. She had fooled them all, but the truth had finally caught up with her. The elders spoke with firm voices. Kina, you have deceived this village. You have broken a home, stolen wealth, and brought shame upon yourself. For your crimes, you are banished from Zundara. You are never to return. A gasp spread through the crowd. Banishment was the worst punishment. Worse than any fine, worse than any humiliation. It meant being cast out into the unknown, with no home, no family, no protection. Kina's face twisted in anger. She turned to Jabo, her voice desperate. Jabo, say something, defend me. But Jabo only stared at her, his eyes hollow, his face filled with regret. For the first time he saw her for who she truly was. She had destroyed his marriage, poisoned his mind with lies, and stolen his peace. And now, standing before him, she was nothing but an empty shell of the woman he had foolishly chosen. With no one left to support her, Kina was forced to leave. The villagers watched in silence as she walked out of Zundara, disgraced and alone, her once beautiful clothes now covered in dust. Jabo stood frozen. His heart felt like a stone in his chest. He had lost everything, his wife, his honor, his peace, and it was all because he had chosen lust over love, lies over truth. He knew there was only one thing left to do. He had to beg for forgiveness. Jabo went to Nyora's home, the same home he had once shared with her before he had thrown it all away for Kina. He found her sitting by the small garden she had planted years ago. She looked up as he approached, her expression unreadable. Nyora, I was a fool. I hurt you in ways I can never undo. Please forgive me. His voice broke with emotion. Nyora looked at him for a long moment. Once, she had loved him with all her heart. Once, she had dreamed of growing old with him. But now, the love she once felt had been replaced by something else. Wisdom, strength, and the knowledge that she deserved better. Jabo, I prayed for the day you would see the truth. But some wounds do not heal. I will not return to you. I have found my peace, and I will not give it up again. Jabo's shoulders sagged. He had hoped for a second chance, but deep down, he knew she was right. Some mistakes could never be undone. Nyora rose gracefully, her face calm, her heart free. She had lost her marriage, but she had gained something even greater, her dignity, her strength, her happiness. As she walked away, Jabo watched, knowing that he had lost not just a wife, but the best thing that had ever happened to him. The village of Zundara had seen many storms, but none quite like this. The fall of Kina and the betrayal of Jabo had left a mark on everyone's hearts. The people whispered about it for days, shaking their heads at the foolishness of a man who had abandoned a loyal wife for a woman of deception. But while Jabo drowned in regret, Nyora rose stronger than ever. Sema, the wise and respected elder, made sure Nyora was given the honor she deserved. She gathered the women of the village and spoke with a firm voice. A woman like Nyora should never have suffered. It is time we honor her, not for what she lost, but for what she overcame. The villagers agreed. They came together to support Nyora, helping her rebuild her life. They praised her strength, her patience, and the dignity with which she had endured betrayal. Soon, she was no longer just Jabo's former wife. She became something greater, a symbol of resilience, a woman who refused to let pain define her. Nyora flourished. She started a new trade, weaving the finest baskets and mats in Zundara. People from neighboring villages came to buy them, and her business grew. With each passing day, she stood taller, her heart lighter. She no longer lived in the shadow of her past. Jabo, however, was not so fortunate. Regret followed him like a shadow. Everywhere he went, he saw reminders of what he had lost. He saw Nyora in the marketplace, her face glowing with happiness, her laughter free. He saw the respect she had gained, the friendships she had built, but he had no place in her world anymore. His home, once filled with warmth and love, felt cold and empty. Kina was gone, and with her, all the promises of a better life. Jabo had chased beauty, only to find loneliness. He had chosen betrayal, only to be left with nothing. Sitting outside his house one evening, Jabo watched the sunset and sighed deeply. He had learned a painful lesson. Not everything that shines is gold, and not every sweet voice speaks the truth. The village, too, learned from his mistake. They no longer believed in empty words or let themselves be fooled by outward beauty. They had seen how lies could break a home, how deception could turn love into sorrow. From that day on, they valued honesty over charm, loyalty over fleeting passion. As for Nyora, she became a legend among the women of Zundara. Mothers told their daughters her story, teaching them never to beg for love, never to lose themselves for a man, and never to let betrayal break them. Nyora had lost a husband, but she had gained wisdom, strength, and freedom, and that, in the end, was worth far more.